Welcome to the last presentation of the day here on the Verdino stage. This presentation will be something super creative. It will be something that really will enhance your mindset, where you can learn and embrace failure as something that you can learn from and something that is actually giving you more and more creativity. And to talk about this here for you today is Roos Durieux, I'm so sorry. And she is one of our UX researchers and will tell you all about how to foster innovation and creativity with an experimental mindset.
Thank you. Cool. So let me take this one. So last talk of the day. Let's see if I can still make it exciting. I first want to tell a little story about why this topic is so important to me. So a few years ago, I actually started a new job at a new company that I didn't know before, and the job, I was super excited to start it. I started as a UX designer, and on paper, this job was the perfect experience. I actually realized it didn't turn out really like that. So what happened actually was, after a few months, I realized that I was not somehow living up to these expectations that they had. So somehow, after everything I did, I tried out something new. I came to the office, and they would somehow criticize me for what I was doing, or they would ask me to defend myself. And I noticed there was this expectations of being perfect, of having a perfect result, of having this perfect process. And I was not managing that. What perfect meant, that depended on who you would ask. I had enough managers to tell me something else about it. At one point, I did, for me, something very cool. I sold my first project. It was after just a few months of work experience. I sold a tiny project, and it was for a client we already had. Together with my boss, but still with barely work experience, I sold a project. I didn't have time to celebrate it. I came back to the office. My boss called me out in the middle of the office space and asked me to explain for about an hour or two why I sold it, how I did it. It was awkward. All my colleagues around me were just pretending to work, pretending that they didn't hear anything about it, but I knew they did. It got me into a lot of stress. I realized I didn't know how to live up to these expectations. I was afraid of failing. And it really got me into a lot of stress. I quit my job. After a while, I found a new job. It was a whole different experience. So what happened is that I was thrown in the deep. The most heard sentence was, "You're the expert, I hired you, you tell me what you want to do." And it freaked me out. My most heard feedback in the beginning was, "Don't do another graduation thesis, just do something." And I started just doing things, just trying things out, seeing how it would work out and what I could learn from it. And I saw that it really changed me. It changed how I saw work. It changed how I was in the company. I started to be super creative, and I started to be really engaged. And I started loving my job again. And I realized that was what was missing before. So that's why I want to address this topic. It's a buzzword bingo. For the end of the day, everybody know one, apparently. So let's dive into the different words one by one. What does creativity mean? Literally, the use of imagination or original ideas to create something, inventiveness. Or with the happy quote, firms are keen to encourage creativity. This actually meant creativity is something intangible. It's something that has to do with activities. It's about adding color to something boring. It's about making stuff exciting. It's about thinking out of the box, but also having the courage to do so. It's about shiny, happy, bright new ideas. Innovation, that comes from it. A new thing or new method of doing something. The introduction of new ideas, methods, or things. Or with another happy quote, innovation is crucial to the continuing success of any organization, of course. It's about taking all these shiny new ideas, putting them all together, and transforming them in value for a customer, and making sure that you have a happy customer. It's about making sure that you have the process in place and that the company supports this process. And then let's talk about experimental mindset, so the big topic. What is experiment? A course of action tentatively adopted without being sure of the outcome. Or with a less fitting quote, but still, the farm is an ongoing experiment in sustainable living. I see experiments as 3 different levels. I see it being important on an individual, on a team, and on a company level. Let's dive into the individual one first. There's a lot written about failure, about experiments, about learnings on an individual level. I don't know if anyone listened to the talk of Elina, but you should filter it out and see whatever you want to learn from it. So I'm going to tell you what my experience is. Is it about practice makes perfect? It's definitely not. It's about the practice itself. It's about making sure that you have this activity in place that you are able to do, to learn, to develop, to improve. It sounds very cool, but it's maybe better explained when you look at it. What if this experimental mindset is not embraced? You have the fear of failure. That's exactly what happened in my first company, what I talked about. I was afraid of being called out again. I was afraid of doing something new. I stayed in my comfortable box and I was not daring to go out of it. It's about criticism and trying to prevent criticism as much as possible, because what happens actually with criticism is it triggers stress hormones. It makes that you have a narrowed mind and that you're not good with dealing with ambiguity. And this all leads to fear of shame. What is shame? It's basically not being able to live up to your expectations, not feeling that you're worth it. So, enough reason to say, let's embrace it. Let's see it as something positive. Let's learn from it. Let's be happy and proud for all those things that you do. And what happens? If you're proud about it, you're happy about it, happy hormones. Happy hormones means that you can deal with ambiguity very well, that you can look at something with a very holistic point of view. Then we look at it from a team level. So what is the team level? You can look at it first from a very sad experience again, but you can all imagine that me not being happy with my job and trying to just stay in my box didn't really also improve in how we worked as a team together. It was everybody on their own. Even when they're awesome people, you do what you do best because it's important that you prevent to be criticized. But what happens if you do encourage it? That is awesome. Then you see something magical. And that happened in another job where I was working, and you saw that we started changing things, tiny things like let's have this stand up this time with all the cameras on rather than doing it again in front of just a microphone. And let's see what happens. Does it improve our stand up? Does it improve our meeting? And what can we learn from it? Can we do a meeting this time with a canvas or with sticky notes? And what do we learn from it? And it creates this feeling of co-owning your team, of your success. It improves the engagement. It's awesome. Then third, the company level. So I can tell about this, about what does the company offer to the customer, because I'm a UX researcher. I want the customer to be happy, but I'm going to tell it a little bit different. It's of course also with the customer in mind, but I tell you my story. I was working as a service designer. You follow design thinking. The first step, what you do is you explore all about the user. So you make sure that you have the problem of the user correct, and that you create this vision of what is actually the problem, what's the challenge, what should we improve. Second step, you go into this problem-solving state of mind. You try to create something, you try to come up with this perfect solution that still makes the user happy. But what happens then? I have this package of knowledge, this package of experience, all this that I know about the user, and I give it to the developers, I give it to designers, and I lose them. I lose them in terms of why are these decisions important? What is important for the user? In this process of giving one package to the other, things got lost in translation. And I mean, there's always then the chance that you build something the user is not happy with. So what did we do? We started experimenting with our process. So we took the idea of the design sprint, so solving the big problems in 5 days, and testing the problems, testing the solutions. So we included the designers, we included the developers, we included sometimes even people from C-level because they wanted to know what the fuss was about. And we started doing this design sprint. What happened is that, well, the first design sprint was kind of a disaster, but we learned a lot from it. We learned how important it was to have the whole team in this process. We saw that everybody started to own the problem, everybody started to own the solution, and everybody started to be so much more engaged. We did more design sprints, we improved it every time, and we didn't end up with a pretty perfect process. But we did make changes, and we did make an impact. Of course, afterwards, you build your product, then the developers take over, designers take over. But still, with this process, we saw that also research was being taken into account more and more integrated into the process in total. So I think it's important to celebrate experiments on 3 levels, to think about how to learn from what you do and focus on learnings, focus on the process, and don't focus on perfect little shiny results. Every level that I talked about has some kind of overlap between each other. They are all very intertwined. It's important in all 3 levels. But if you make sure that on an individual level, you have the the safe space to do what you want, to be creative about it, to focus on just doing things, you have more comfort to also try that out on a team level. If you do that on a team level, more engagement. Then there's only a tiny step in also making this impact in an organization, offer a real value, and create happy clients and users. Thank you. There's the applause, guys.
Thanks a lot. Thank you so much for this great talk with the positive message. I think it's a great talk to end today's Verdino track. And if you at home or on the screen have some questions for Roos, please go ahead, add them to the chat. This is the last time you can do it today. Maybe one question from my side. What's something now that you've been working with TX Markets for some months that you experienced as something that was also adding to your everyday experience that inspired you and gave you new creativity?
Cool question. I think it's kind of a question you ask for yourself because it's actually a project that we're doing together. So we're doing this project together where we're just exploring a user group rather than testing a new product or whatever. And we take the ownership of this research in our own hands, and we do it in a little bit of a different process. So we make sure that we have these iteration cycles and that we have open review sessions and engage clients and stakeholders in a different way. And I think that is a very cool concept. Like, we learned a lot from it already. We know what we can improve, but we also know what works about it. And I think that's really cool to see how in that way we're already making change and making an impact.
Wow, that's great. That's great to hear. Also, as being part of this project, of course, happy to hear. That's cool. Benjamin asks, when you make mistakes, this can be expensive so for the company, but it's important. So when do you draw the line?
Oh yeah, that's a question. So I've thought also a lot about it. Like, you don't always experiment with everything, of course, and you don't always do the crazy stuff out of the box. I was thinking about it, for example, yesterday I filled in my timesheet. My team lead would not be happy if I would be creative with that one. So yeah, there's always a time and a way to do so, but I do think that there's always a way of learning from it. So how do you look at this being expensive? How do you look at the current process? Is it really something really big? Are you experimenting with the product itself? Or are you experimenting with, for example, how to change a meeting? I mean, it can be super tiny and it can have a super big effect on the product that you're working on and on the process that you're following. So I think that you can break it down in maybe even these 3 levels. And if on the biggest level it's too expensive and it's too big, then look at it from your collaboration level or your personal level. How do you feel How do you feel safe to experiment on that, and how is it valuable?
Oh, that's actually a really good answer to a very complicated question. Thanks. So, thanks again for your presentation, and for everyone on the screen, please stay with us for the next 5 minutes. There will be one last presentation, one last talk coming up, the closing talk by Harry and Sam that are already waiting over there. So stay with us, only a few minutes to go, and see you later.